What's up everybody, Vandrel here, and today we're going to be talking about the E-50M. So as you probably already know, it was buffed in update 1.10.1, which came out earlier this week as of this video. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about exactly what was changed on the tank in the update, how it affects the overall package, and how the tank fits into the current meta of the game. So first off, let's talk about survivability, because this is what was changed in the update for this tank. The face of the turret was buffed to about 280mm effective, and the cheeks were buffed to be effectively impenetrable. Not even Jagdpanzer E100 heat rounds are going through the cheeks of this thing now. The mantlet also received a buff, not quite to the same extent, but it'll stop almost anything that shoots at it now, meaning that the only place on the turret that will be penetrable is the small flat face around the gun, and even that's going to stop almost any silver rounds going at it. The hull armor hasn't been changed, but it was already pretty good. The upper glacis is about 280mm effective. The lower glacis only gets to about 240 when angled perfectly, so it's not going to stop any tier 10s. But if you're in a tier 8-9 match with it, you're going to get to bully people that won't be able to penetrate you from the front, unless they get a good, a lucky high roll on their gold rounds. The sides are also pretty strong at 80mm thick, meaning this tank can side scrape pretty effectively, and they won't get overmatched by anything short of a 183mm gun. Combine that with the highest health among tier 10 mediums, aside from the T95E6, which you're never going to see, and you have a medium with some serious staying power. Now let's talk about the gun. It's incredibly accurate, only 0.01 worse than the Leopard 1, and extremely good penetration to go along with it. But those stats do come with some serious drawbacks. The gun handling is average at best, and the damage per minute is third worst among tier 10 mediums, only ahead of the Batchat and the Progetto. But the low DPM really isn't that big of an issue when combined with the high health pool. For instance, an Object 140 with its extremely high DPM will kill an E-50M in about the same amount of time that an E-50M will take to kill an Object 140. So in one-on-one situations, you're really not out of luck. You can hold your own. Now let's talk about the mobility. Despite all of that armor, the E-50M is still a very mobile tank with a top speed of 60 kilometers per hour and a horsepower per ton of about 20. Now, high terrain resistances keep that in check, but it's still very, very mobile. And since it weighs 60 tons, and you can get it going 60 kilometers an hour, you can do some serious ramming damage with it. You really don't even have to be going very fast to ram an enemy medium for 200 to 300 damage. And so if you nail somebody for 390 going in and ram them for 300 and then get another 390 shot 8 seconds later, then you're talking like 1100 damage in 8 seconds, which is pretty competitive with the rate that even some autoloaders deal damage. You can go in and take out a half health medium in about 8 seconds. You have to be really careful though, because if you get a little overzealous with ramming, you're going to find yourself in a bad position and you're very quickly going to die. So just to summarize the pros and cons of this tank, it has excellent accuracy and penetration, pretty good armor, and high mobility that allows it to stay relevant at all stages of the game. But that's balanced out by pretty average gun handling and DPM as far as tier 10 mediums go, and honestly, the size of this tank, it's big as far as mediums go. You're the size of most heavies, and as such, it's hard to hide, and it's got much lower camo than pretty much every other tier 10 medium. So, do I think the armor buff was good enough to make this into a good tank in the modern game? Actually, yes. On paper, it looked like a pretty small buff to me, but I vastly underestimated it. It was a huge boost to survivability, especially because those cheeks that are basically impossible to penetrate now, you get so many people trying to shoot the face of your turret, but they just don't have the accuracy to do it. So it's been pretty common for me to find myself with 2,000 to 3,000 damage blocked at the end of a lot of matches with this tank. And when you combine that with the accuracy and penetration and mobility that this tank has, it's the most versatile tank in the game. As far as mediums go, sure, the 430U's armor is a little bit better still, Sure, other tanks have higher DPM, the Leopard's a little bit better at sniping, but nothing does so many things as well as this tank does. And so the sheer versatility of this tank makes it incredibly effective for random matches. You're never going to find a map or situation where the tank isn't effective. You have the armor to brawl, you have the accuracy and penetration to snipe, you have the mobility to run with other mediums and swarm people. You're just literally always going to be able to be effective in this tank. And so while others may do certain things better, the 430U's armor is a little bit better, the Leopard's a little bit better at sniping, other mediums are better at just sheer DPM, but nothing does so many things as well as this tank does all at the same time. And the buffs to the turret armor just make all of that usable, because now you're not getting penetrated every time you try to peek for a shot. You're going to bounce a serious number of shots in those situations where you're forced to be close range and getting shot. Alright, now let's talk equipment. My own personal favorite loadout on this tank, not including bounty equipment or bond equipment, is to use an improved rotation mechanism on the bonus slot, plus a rammer and vents in the other two. So why an improved rotation mechanism over a vertical stabilizer? Well, in the bonus slot, it bumps up to 12.5% instead of 10%, and so you're getting a little over half of a vertical stabilizer, plus a hull and turret traverse speed bonus, which takes away all of the sluggish feeling that this tank has. And then the rammer and vents are to try to maximize what little DPM it does have. And I think there's also an argument to be made to go for the turbocharger over the vents, depending on what exactly you're after. It's already pretty quick. I like going fast, so I love the turbocharger, but I think the vents are probably gonna edge it out most of the time, especially if you combine it with the vent directive to make them even better. So how exactly should you play the tank to make the most of it? Well, as I talked about earlier, it's an extremely versatile tank, so you can do pretty much anything with it and do pretty alright. But I do recommend that you try to have most of your engagements at the 300 to 400 meter range, because you have the accuracy to pinpoint your shots from there pretty easily, while most other people don't. And at that range, without accuracy, your enemies are mostly going to be a little bit off from where they aim, which on this tank means they're mostly going to be bouncing. And then, once the match has developed a bit, this tank has the mobility to adapt and reposition to whatever the situation calls for. If you need to move up to keep getting shots because your team is pushing in, you can get there really fast. If you need to fall back because the other team is pushing in, you can do that really quickly as well. You can get where you need to be when you need to be there to keep collecting damage. But at the same time, this versatility is also the reason that this tank will essentially never be used for clan wars. It just doesn't specialize enough for that. So if clan wars is what you have in mind, you should probably look elsewhere. But for random battles, and maybe even for ranked, we'll have to see how it plays out with these buffs, but possibly even for ranked with the random map selection, it's an excellent tank for random battles now. And don't forget, if you liked this or found it helpful and would be interested in more content like this, hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if there's something specific that you'd like to see, feel free to leave a comment. And you can also find me on Twitch at the link in the description below.